The E30 M3 is about as iconic as BMWs come. Was it the company's greatest car though? It was hugely successful on the track in both national and international championships all over the world, as well as proving to be an enduring enthusiast favourite on the road too. But the enormous success of the first M3 was far from a guarantee, and it certainly wasn't plain sailing. In 1984, the trajectory of German motorsport changed forever with the introduction of the Deutsche Produktionswagen Meisterschaft, or DPM.
BMW were interested in the new championship, being one of Germany's biggest manufacturers and all that, and entered the series from the very beginning.
They had been contesting the European Touring Car Championship in the early 80s with the 635 CSI, a Group A car based on the company's 3-litre straight 6-powered two-door coupe. It was just the latest in a long line of BMW touring cars to contest the series, going all the way back to the BMW 2000, with the 3-litre CSL serving a long stint at the front of the field through the 70s. But by 1984 and the dawn of DPM, the 635 CSI was BMW's most modern and capable Group A machine. So that's what they used. With DPM being so new, it shouldn't be surprising that the reigning ETCC winning car would find success right off the bat. BMW's 635 CSI took the championship's first ever win in the hands of Volker Streichek. That said, it wasn't a walk in the park. Streichek hadn't actually won a single race,
but consistency had proven more powerful than outright pace, and the stage was set for a new touring car battleground.
Over the following couple of years, BMW wasn't able to repeat the success, losing to Volvo in 1985 in both DPM and ETCC, and then losing to Rover in 1986, when the championship was officially renamed to the Deutsche Tourenwagen Meisterschaft, or DTM. It was clear that the 635 CSI wasn't cutting it anymore, and that if BMW wanted to be serious contenders in the burgeoning championship, they were going to need a better machine to do it. Today, BMW's M Division and the famous single-letter logo so ubiquitously glued to the back of 10-year-old 120Ds the world over has come to define the BMW brand. A single letter that stands for performance and driving pleasure, and the unfortunate cashing in on that cachet by the brand to sell ever less convincing performance variants of ugly, overweight finance fodder.
Not to say that everything currently adorned with an M badge is unworthy, but its potency has surely been diluted by decades of badge marketing.
But how did M become such a draw to begin with that BMW would feel the need to lean on its legacy to sell new cars? Well, the division has been around since 1972 and was responsible for BMW's racing machines from the 3-litre CSL onward, with the M1 appearing as the first M car in 1978. But the direction of M would change dramatically when they were tasked with replacing the ageing 635 CSI.
But first, a quick word from this video's sponsor, Babbel. I took 3 years of German lessons in school. I'm glad I did, and I'm sure some of it got through, but a lot of it just didn't stick. Something about staring at walls of text in a 400-page textbook just didn't connect with me, and I just thought it wasn't for me. But I've started learning German again using Babbel, and I'm really enjoying it. Learning another language is a wonderful thing. Whether you want to be able to hold a conversation when you're ordering a croissant on holiday, or like me, it would have some professional application. Believe it or not, a lot of the information about German cars is written in German. Deutschland baut viel Autos. Babbel gives you the tools to learn for real-life conversations and situations. Babbel's approachable and engaging lessons are wunderbar and nicht so langweilig as that wall of text that had put me off. Babbel is one of the top language learning apps in the world, so if you're like me and you want to give learning a language another go, or you're starting from scratch, go to the link in the description below and get 60% off today. They've got a 20-day money-back guarantee as well, so you can try it, and if it's not for you, there's no worries. Oh, and let me know in the comments section which language you'd like to learn and why. Not that you need a reason. Danke Babbel for sponsoring this video, and now, back to the show.
Given that the Group A regulations DTM was governed by dictated that the competition cars had to be based on and not too far removed from a road-going counterpart of which at least 5,000 had been built,
though with later variations this number decreased and evolution rules allowed for smaller numbers of follow-up models, etc, etc.
BMW needed to select a base car that was capable of transforming into a monster on the track. They selected the two-door E30 series that had first appeared for sale in 1982. It appeared a very savvy choice, with a sporty shape and not much mass, but there was a long way to go before the E30 could win races. The chassis was revised, the wheel track widened, aero tweaks made, and most consequential of all was the change in engine philosophy. The 635 had used a 3-litre inline-6, an engine BMW was known for. Inline-6 is still common in Beamers today. But the M3 would use a 4-cylinder instead. The 2.3-litre 4-banger was noticeably lighter than the straight 6 and could be positioned further back in the car for better weight distribution, and could even rev up to 9,000 RPM. In road car trim, the first generation M3 made around 200 horsepower, but tuned up for racing, it made around 100 horsepower more than that.
Paired with a small, light body and a race-ready chassis, BMW Motorsport were ready to fight back.
Lots of BMW's customer teams were keen to race with the new car, with the start of the 1987 DTM season seeing M3s in the hands of Alpina, Autohaus Volstadt Racing, Vogelsang Automobil and Zakspeed. The first two races of the season were strong for BMW, with Harald Gross winning the opening round at Hockenheim for Vogelsang Autos, and Mark Hessel winning round 2 for Zakspeed. Unfortunately for BMW, the next few rounds were totally controlled by Ford's Sierra XR4, which in the hands of Manuel Reuter and Frank Biela clearly appeared fit for a championship win. But Ford's run came to an end at Norrisring, when Olaf Mante took victory in an M3, with Hessel not far behind. The Sierra XR4 would take its last win at the Nürburgring, destined for replacement by the RS 500 for the final few rounds, with BMW taking victory at Wunstorf and Diepholz, before Ford rounded out the season by winning in Salzburg with their new car. The back and forth between BMW and Ford had made for some great racing, and the championship could have gone many ways. But in the end, it went to Zakspeed driver Erik van der Poel in his M3.
Despite the fact he hadn't won a single race, his consistency throughout the season was favoured by the points system, just like the last time they'd won.
BMW had achieved their goal, and successfully engineered their way back to the top of the DTM totem pole. But how did the new M3 fare elsewhere? BMW continued to contest the ETCC2, fielding their new car alongside the old 635. Of the 7 races that made up the 1987 ETCC, BMW M3s won 6 of them, with the championship being won by Winnie Vogt racing for Linde Rennsport. ETCC 1987 isn't remembered too fondly, partly due to its cannibalization by the short-lived World Touring Car Championship, or WTCC, which took place alongside.
This championship too was divisive, as right at the last minute a $60,000 entry fee was imposed, which a lot of the competitors refused to pay. I believe this was another one of Bernie Ecclestone's masterful gambits.
Nevertheless, BMW M3s appeared in the races, and the Drivers' Championship was won by Roberto Ravaglia racing for Schnitzer BMW. Unfortunately, they missed out on the Teams' Championship by just 4 points, losing to Texaco Team Ford. BMW fielded entries in larger non-championship events too, including the 24-hour races at Spa and the Nürburgring. In 1987, Ford won at the Nürburgring, but BMW saw victory in Belgium, proving the M3 wasn't just fast, but reliable enough to win a grueling 24-hour race. On a side note, BMW were also contesting some rounds of the World Rally Championship with the M3. Of course, on loose surfaces, the rear-wheel drive BMW wouldn't have stood a chance, but it showed strong pace on the tarmac, managing to win the 1987 Tour de Course, stamping the M badge into yet another history book.
BMW had created a monster. To celebrate the victory, they built a number of Evolution models, though confusingly these were not Group A Evolution Rule homologation cars.
BMW were working on a much more serious Evo car for competing in DTM, with the celebratory machine dubbed the Evo 1 and the serious racing car dubbed the Evo 2. Development of the Evo 2 was necessary to try and stay ahead of the ever-advancing Mercs and Fords. They made a number of tweaks, including lightening the flywheel and fiddling with the final drive ratio to eke out a slightly higher top speed. Some engine fettling resulted in around a 10% power gain. 501 road cars were built to tick off the Evolution homologation requirement, and it was game on for 1988.
Well, nearly.
In 1988, DTM's championship format was changed, moving from the traditional one race on a Sunday model to 2 races per weekend, one on Saturday and one on Sunday. While the races were relatively short, generally around 55 minutes, the doubleheader format certainly delivered the action. Despite showing serious strength in 1987,
the 1988 DTM season was unlikely to be a cakewalk for the BMW runners, who would have to wait until the latter half of the season to get their hands on the new Evolution car, which had only gone into production that March.
Mercedes was no joke, and the Sierra RS 500 had proven itself to be a formidable force in the few races it had contested at the end of the previous season. Unsurprisingly, therefore, the first 2 races at Zolder went the way of Klaus Ludwig at Ford. But in round 2 at Hockenheim, Christian Danner, racing for Alpina, took 2 wins, only making way for Kurt Thiem at the first race of round 3 at the Nürburgring, also driving an M3. Despite the strong start, the next couple of races made clear that Ford and Mercedes were the true powers on track in 1988. Even in spite of efforts by the governing body to slow down the turbocharged Ford using a restrictor plate. It didn't work. The Sierra RS 500 was by far and away the fastest car on track. Roberto Ravaglia, driving for Schnitzer, who were new to the DTM fold, would score a double victory in Salzburg, though it must be said that victory in this instance is perhaps a stretch. Race 1 saw 3 starts, all of them calamitous, before it was eventually cancelled due to the mayhem.
The following day, race 2 got underway, only for so many cars to be taken out by on-track score settling that race 2 was cancelled.
The remaining 2 events were more fighting between Ford and Mercedes, with BMW not troubling the top spot again. In the end, Klaus Ludwig took championship victory, deserved for both him and the mighty Sierra RS 500 that carried him there. WTCC folded after 1987, leaving ETCC as BMW's other big stage. In the European Championship, 1988 was kind of a repeat of 1987 results-wise, though the journey was a little different. Like DTM, measures had been taken to slow down the Sierra. This time though, it was added weight, but it didn't make much difference. The rules shake-up had caused Alfa Romeo to abandon the championship, leaving most of the racing down to Ford, BMW, Toyota, and occasionally Nissan. Ford should have won easily, but luck was on BMW's side, and Ravaglia won the Drivers' Championship for the 2nd year in a row. Ford once again won the Teams' Championship.
The constant messing and the ill-fated World Touring Car Championship saw the internationalised series so fragmented and damaged that 1988 would be its final series for a long time.
Like WTCC the year before, it collapsed. 1988 saw BMW pip to the post again at the 24 Hours of the Nürburgring, this time by Porsche, though they were able to defend the top spot at Spa, winning for the 2nd year in a row. The BMW had become a favourite in many national championships, unsurprisingly seeing a reasonable degree of success. I won't be covering all of these events for brevity, but in BTCC, Frank Sittner won overall after amassing 11 class wins across the 13 races. BTCC was home to a huge grid and fierce competition in 1988, but it was Sittner and Team ProDrive that performed best in Class B. Class A, on the other hand, was totally overrun with Sierras. No surprises there. The failure of WTCC and the collapse of ETCC shortly thereafter could appear as a negative thing for touring car racing.
But all those teams, cars and drivers still wanted to race, and for many of them, DTM appeared to be the perfect opportunity.
The competition was heating up, and audiences were bigger than ever heading into 1989. Despite strong qualifying pace from the M3, it wouldn't be until the fourth race, race 2 at Hockenheim, that Johnny Cecotto would score BMW's first victory of the season for Team Schnitzer. But it was far from the last. Steve Soper, racing for Zakspeed, scored a double win at the Nürburgring, and a couple of races later, Roberto Ravaglia won the Saturday race at Avers. But the Mercedes cars were strong, as were Ford despite the restrictors and weight penalties. Every race was a fight. Soper and Cecotto would pick up an extra win each over the next 3 rounds, with Ravaglia remaining a consistent presence just behind the podium spots. By now, everyone knew that winning wasn't the only way to win. At Die Holz, Klaus Ludwig would take a double victory for Mercedes and repeated the feat at the next round too. The final round was controlled by Ford, but Ravaglia, helped by a second place finish in the final race, managed to secure the championship.
Despite only having won 1 race out of the 22 race season, the scoresheet once again rewarded consistency over outright performance, and BMW's M3 proved the perfect tool for the job.
The M3 returned to the non-championship 24-hour races at Spa and the Nürburgring again in 1989, taking victory in the Green Hell, managing to beat Porsche. Unfortunately, they weren't so lucky at Spa, losing out to the Sierra RS 500. Despite winning in DTM in 1989 and establishing that the M3 was a top contender in all things Group A, BMW were keen to stay ahead of the game heading into the 90s. To this end, development was underway on the M3 Evo 3, better known as the Sport Evolution. The changes were the biggest made yet, with the engine bored out to 2.5 litres, more extreme aero parts including a larger splitter and rear wing, and a few other little adjustments to squeeze out every ounce of performance possible from the car.
The result was even more power than the Evo 2 and theoretically better drivability too, but there was only one way to find out for sure if it was all worth it.
DTM tinkered with the rule set going into 1990, banning turbos most notably. BMW and Mercedes were unaffected by this, but the Ford Sierra RS 500 and its turbocharged Cosworth engine were pretty much forced out by the change, and Ford weren't interested in trying to make it work. From BMW's perspective, this meant less competition, although there was going to be a new name entering the fray in the form of Audi. But they had a brand new car. Surely they weren't going to be a threat to BMW's Evo 3. 1990 saw a mixed bag of results for the BMW runners, of which there was a few. Steve Soper racing for Bugatti and Johnny Cecotto racing for Schnitzer both had their moments early in the season, with Cecotto managing a standout double win at Mainz-Finten. But the story of the season was Hans Stuck, racing in a single-car Audi entry for SMS. Audi's V8 Quattro DTM car had shaken things up far more than had been expected, using a much larger engine, Quattro all-wheel drive, and winning despite the extra weight.
Audi hadn't completely dominated the season though, and by the final round, Cecotto was still in contention for the championship.
SMS wheeled out 2 extra Audis to help secure Stuck's championship, but in the end, it was an accident that made all the difference. Michael Schumacher, driving a Mercedes, spun Cecotto around at Hockenheim, handing championship victory to Stuck. This was pretty devastating for BMW, who had been iterating on the M3 for years and had just unleashed the very best version of it yet, only to be beaten by a brand new car that ran by itself for most of the season. With the same car for 1991, and the Audi only being at the beginning of its development curve, how confident could BMW reasonably have been of a resurgence? In the first round of 1991, resurgence looked on the cards, as Cecotto took a double victory at Zolder, and then Soper took a double victory in the second round at Hockenheim. If hopes had been shattered in 1990, they were surely creeping back after M3s took 4 consecutive wins.
Unfortunately, the next couple of rounds were winless for all of the Beamer runners, with Klaus Ludwig picking up wins in his Mercedes and Stuck returning to the top step for Audi, and Frank Biela finding a win in his own Audi racing for AZR. Avis saw a win for Cecotto in race 2, and Wunstorf played out well too, as Cecotto's teammate Joe Winkelhock took a win in race 1 and Cecotto won the next day. But despite flashes of performance for the M3, it was clear that Audi's V8 Quattro was still too fast to beat. AZR driver Frank Biela won the championship, cementing Audi's grip on DTM. But while BMW were on the back foot in DTM, M3s didn't stop winning elsewhere, winning the Nürburgring 24 Hours in both 1990 and 1991, as well as taking back their crown at the Spa 24 Hours in 1990, unfortunately losing it again to Nissan the following year. The M3 clearly still had winning potential, but that damn V8 Audi had really put a damper on their DTM efforts. Even without them, Mercedes would be serious enough, but without excessive further development, did BMW have a chance? Or was the M3 finally beginning to show its age? 1992 saw the disappearance of Opel, though the fact this is the first time I'm mentioning them so far should tell you everything you need to know about how impactful they'd been in the championship up to this point. It was Mercedes that started on the front foot in 1992, despite engine upgrades bought by Audi. In fact, Audi spent the first couple of races struggling with reliability problems. Defending champion Frank Biela driving for AZR was disqualified from race 2 at Wunstorf for an illegal crankshaft. The previous year's Audi, and crucially the V8 Quattro road car, had a 90-degree cross-plane crank. Biela's car had a 180-degree flat-plane crank. Audi insisted that the crankshaft was legal, as it wasn't a new component, but rather a modified one that they had reshaped. It seems this line of defense had held when the change was initially questioned earlier in the season, but after protests and re-examination, it was deemed to be too far removed from the homologated spec and was declared illegal. Audi didn't immediately drop out of the championship, but after a couple more races, they eventually did. They felt that the rules were being enforced unfairly. But with Audi out of the fight, the only real competitors left were BMW and Mercedes, and unfortunately for BMW, it was the three-pointed star that controlled the track. Winkelhock and Soper managed wins at Norrisring, and Cecotto, now racing for FINA's BMW entry, pulled off a double win at Brno, but then the next few rounds were once again a sea of Mercedes victories. BMW finished on a high note at least, with Roberto Ravaglia claiming a double win at the season's final round at Hockenheim, but it wasn't enough. BMW pulled factory support after 1992, focusing on a next-generation car. Just as well, as the M3s that remained in competition in private hands going into 1993 found themselves predictably losing to Alfa Romeo's crazy 155, which had been built to the new Class 1 specification. The Group A era was over. The M3 won the Nürburgring 24 Hours in 1992 and the Spa 24 Hours as well, before the E30 was eventually replaced by the next generation M3 heading into the mid-90s. That's a story for another day. Despite having kind of fizzled out over its final few years in DTM, the E30 M3 had secured itself an enviable legacy. 2 DTM titles, championship victories in ETCC and WTCC, and Group A wins all over the world, in Australia, Japan, and all over Europe. It's truly one of the greats, and deserves its place as one of the most iconic and beloved sports cars of all time. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video, and until next time, goodbye.